A few years ago, something unspeakably unsettling happened with my best friend when I was just 15. One night, after a sleepover filled with spine-chilling movies, we craved a taste of real fear. Not far from my friend's house stood a condemned block, a cluster of houses teetering on the edge of ruin, slated for demolition in just 2 days. The entire area was cordoned off with rickety fences, and ominous warning signs screamed, "Do not enter," in faded letters. Every building was shuttered with thick wooden planks. Doors and windows were sealed tight, ensuring no one could break in. Spurred by a reckless desire for adventure, we decided to sneak onto the block and snap some photos. My friend claimed he knew a secret entry point, but as we wandered through the desolate street, we discovered that every house was as impenetrable as a tomb, except for one. High on the top floor of a dilapidated house, a single window was poorly boarded up, its broken frame offering a glimpse into an otherwise sealed room. With trembling hands, we took a picture using a digital camera, our hearts pounding in unison. Later that night, as we huddled in the safety of our homes, we reviewed the photos. There, in the dim light of the captured image, was a woman. She wore a tattered brown raincoat. Her skin was unnaturally pale, and her long black hair framed a face etched with sorrow. We hadn't seen a soul when we were there, yet her mournful eyes stared back at us from the window, as if pleading for release. Haunted by what we had witnessed, we returned to the site to confirm our terror. Every barrier was intact, every window securely boarded. There was no sign of a woman, but the image remained, a ghostly imprint of despair, forever marking that forsaken block as a place where the boundary between the living and the dead had been tragically blurred. This isn't my own tale. It's what my friend Oliver from England endured. I've changed names and places to protect identities. Oliver was only 11 when the unsettling events began. A quiet, well-liked boy, he had his share of youthful admirers. One of them was Charlotte, a 17-year-old who lived just down the lane. At first, her constant messages, "Stay safe, hope you're well," seemed like overprotective kindness. But soon, her concern took a disturbing turn. Charlotte began following Oliver both in person and online. Her texts grew more intrusive and oddly specific. "Make sure you eat lunch," she'd say if he skipped a meal. And, on hearing his little sister cry, she remarked, "I think your sister must be hungry." The barrage of unsettling messages forced Oliver to disconnect from his phone and social media, though the relentless attention didn't stop there. With his mother often away, Oliver was left in the care of babysitters. One day, a new babysitter arrived, none other than Charlotte. Though she appeared to be just another caregiver, her presence was unnervingly close. One afternoon at school, Charlotte pulled Oliver aside and explained that his mother was leaving on a business trip for a week, insisting he should stay at her home for his own safety. Hesitant but trusting, Oliver agreed, believing he was following his mother's wishes. When he arrived at Charlotte's house, an oppressive silence welcomed him. The interiors were dim and uninviting, with a coldness that seemed to seep into his bones. Over the next few days, Charlotte began involving Oliver in bizarre games. In one twisted roleplay, she acted as though they were a family, she the wife and him, the reluctant husband, forcing him into scenarios that blurred the boundaries of innocence and something far more sinister. At times, she blindfolded him and locked him in a silent room, testing his limits with unnerving precision. Then, one fateful afternoon, while Charlotte was at work, Oliver sat in a darkened room, watching television. A news report flashed across the screen, a missing child description that sent his heart racing, unmistakably matching his own features. Before he could grasp what was happening, the screen went black. In that split second, he felt a presence behind him. Charlotte, standing with the remote in her hand. In a surge of terror, Oliver broke free from her grasp and managed to escape through an open window, crying out for help. A passing couple heard his desperate calls and alerted the police. Within an hour, authorities arrived to find him locked in a room, hands bound and blindfolded, a haunting remnant of that dark chapter. Though Oliver was rescued and Charlotte apprehended, the memory of that night still haunts him, a stark reminder that sometimes the most sinister horrors hide in plain sight. About 5 years ago, I lived in the heart of a bustling European city. I've always been a creature of the night, so while my roommate, who despised late hours, slept, I would wander the dark streets, lost in thought. For 4 years, I strolled these lonely avenues without ever feeling unsafe. I even joked that even the local lowlifes seemed unusually polite. But one Wednesday night, between 1 and 2 a.m., everything changed. I was walking near a well-patrolled park far from my apartment. It was a quiet night with little traffic and hardly any people. I took a short detour down a narrow side street to loop back home when I first saw him. At the far end of the street, I noticed the silhouette of a man dancing. His movements were strangely graceful, a waltz with an odd, forward-leaning step. I assumed he was simply intoxicated and shifted to the edge of the sidewalk to let him pass. The closer he got, the more I observed. He was tall and lanky, dressed in an old, worn suit. As he danced nearer, I could see his face clearly. His eyes were wide and wild, his head tilted back as if he were fixated on something above, and his smile was unnaturally broad, a grotesque, cartoonish grin that sent a chill down my spine. Feeling increasingly unsettled, I decided to cross the street to put some distance between us. As I reached the other side and glanced back, I froze. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly facing me, his head still thrown back, that disturbing smile etched on his face. I resumed walking but kept my eyes fixed on him. When I looked away for a moment to survey the empty street ahead, he was gone. Relief washed over me until I saw him again. He had crossed the street and was now crouched down, clearly watching me. I knew he had moved swiftly, and I was paralyzed with shock. I stood rooted to the spot as he began moving toward me again. His steps were exaggerated and tiptoed, almost like a character from a nightmare, yet he was advancing with alarming speed. I didn't run. I didn't reach for my phone or anything. My body just froze in terror. As he crept closer, he stopped a car length away, still smiling, still gazing upward. When I finally mustered the courage to speak, my voice emerged as a feeble whimper instead of the commanding tone I had intended. He did nothing, just continued standing there, with that unsettling smile. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned and started dancing away, as if nothing had happened. I watched him until he was nearly out of sight, then realized something horrifying. He wasn't moving away. I saw him in the distance, growing larger as he ran back toward me. Panic seized me, and I ran until I reached a well-lit road with some traffic. When I looked back, he had vanished, leaving me to wonder if I had truly escaped. For the remainder of my journey home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, terrified that his maddened grin might appear again. I lived in that city for another 6 months, but I never went out for another walk at night. There was something about his face, a look not of drunkenness or simple madness, but of pure, unhinged insanity that still haunts me. In the mid-'80s, my mother, whom I'll call Linda, worked as a cleaning lady in a grim industrial town in Eastern Europe. She cleaned houses in the old neighborhoods and even ventured into remote, fog-bound countryside estates. Linda built her business by leaving her modest cards in local shops and relying on word-of-mouth referrals. One overcast afternoon, she received a call from a stern woman, let's call her Ms. Volkov, whose voice betrayed a lifetime of secrets. Ms. Volkov, around 60 years old, requested that Linda clean her crumbling farmhouse on the outskirts of town. The woman made several peculiar demands and refused to meet in person, insisting she'd leave the keys beneath the front mat. Tempted by the unusually generous pay, Linda accepted without hesitation. On a gray Monday morning, Linda drove to the farmhouse. The long, desolate driveway and the isolated, sprawling property filled her with a sense of dread. Upon arrival, she retrieved the keys and began her work inside the silent, dilapidated house. About an hour into her cleaning, as she moved to tend to the back room, she noticed the back door had mysteriously swung shut. Having been assured that no one else would be present, Linda's instincts screamed that something was horribly wrong. She froze in the kitchen, her heart pounding, as she listened to the oppressive silence. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few minutes, she forced herself to continue. The remainder of the job was set in 2 bleak bedrooms. As Linda entered one of them, she found the bed covered in black and white photographs. With a growing chill, she recognized that every picture depicted her, some taken at our family home, others in locations where she had once worked. It was as if someone had been watching her every move, compiling a sinister archive. Panicking, Linda grabbed the old telephone and called the police before fleeing to the end of the long driveway. In the ensuing investigation, Ms. Volkov maintained that a break-in had occurred, but no one could explain the photos. The authorities eventually abandoned their search, and 4 months later, our family was forced to move to a new town. To this day, the haunting images and the unsettling secrets of that farmhouse continue to cast a long, dark shadow over my memories. I'm 22, and it was a night I'll never forget. A year and a half ago, when I had just moved into my first apartment in a gloomy quarter of an old European city. The entrance door automatically locks when closed, so after grabbing my mail at the complex's entry while chatting with a friend, I returned home. I settled onto my bed to sort through the letters while still on the phone. In a careless moment, I dropped my phone, and it tumbled under the bed. As I leaned down to retrieve it, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A figure, motionless and shrouded in darkness, lying under my bed. Its back was turned to me, head bowed so I couldn't see its face. I froze, swallowing the scream that clawed at my throat. In a desperate bid to maintain some semblance of control, I muttered, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I just need to take a shower and call you back," and bolted toward the bathroom beside my bed. I locked the door behind me, turned on the shower, and my mind raced as I jumped out the window to call the police. They instructed me to wait across the street, hidden behind a parked car, where I could keep a wary eye on my building's entrance and the bathroom window. It was summer, and the late hour cast long, unsettling shadows over everything. My friend soon arrived, and just before the police got there, I handed over my keys. Moments later, 2 officers emerged, escorting out a thin, haggard man whose eyes flickered with wild, unhinged intensity. One officer, standing close by to reassure me, explained that the intruder had been waiting outside my bathroom door, clutching one of my kitchen knives, as if expecting me to emerge. Somehow, He had slipped in through the unlocked entry while I was at the mailroom, and then hidden beneath my bed. In the aftermath, it turned out that this madman was a homeless drifter with a shattered mind. He was taken away to a psychiatric facility. But the memory of his vacant, desperate eyes and that moment of paralyzing terror still haunts me. A chilling reminder that sometimes the darkness hides more than just shadows.